Hi there, Randi here, and welcome to podcast number 2 on the food section of our Food, Health and Environment project for 2023. I'll go into a little bit of practicality here because actually I'm doing that as always, exemplifying it. And years ago, more specifically back in 2017, I engaged on certain products and certain types of foods, and I've been sticking to that actually since, the same products, because they were organic when I began buying them, and you know what I'm alluding to here. And now I'm doing this revision. I'm revising everything, looking into, okay, how do I actually want to do this? Because of all the other stuff that was going on, the constant battles, the constant this, the constant that, and traveling and what have you, I just minimized whatever I had to do with food to just be similar. If I could have just eaten a pill a day or 2 pills a day, I would have done that. So that was based upon smoothies, primarily fruit on either oat milk or on some kind of Danish produced soy milk, because we are here in Europe, we are producing our own soybeans, so we don't have to import them from countries from South America and what have you. So we are doing that because they can be grown here as well. So we are, and kinds of the pancakes I made myself, and then some kind of simple dishes that I would just repeat over and over and over again, kind of having a little bit extra here and there, but not much, just bootstrapping whatever cost I was using for food so that I could save money, so I didn't have to have so much expenses on it. And then at the same time, I didn't have to focus on, what do I need to cook today? As in just going in, just doing, these are the elements I know I need to eat. These are the ones that will get the nutrition I need. Also using supplements, vegan supplements, very important. Go for the vegan ones, because normal supplements, they are in what we call some kind of a gel capsule, many of them, and that is actually made out of bones from animals. So cellulosis, that's bones from animals that they are put into. So therefore we need vegan that are not in these little, you can have plant-based, we are producing that in Denmark as well. So, but again, not needed. So just be mindful that if you do supplements, and I do recommend supplements, because even though we're saying, well, I have this very broad, diverse type of food intake with many different elements, and you looked into it, you study what you need to have to keep up the nutrition as you're supposed to. We are living in an environment, we're living on a planet where the sun is no longer fueling the plants to the same degree. We're having constant chemtrailing that makes the leaves and what we're eating fragile, and they are scattered in their molecular structure, which makes them, sometimes the green is off, they look different. So this also goes into, of course, then we have the whole organic thing, the discussion on the organic food that we can have. And I want to point out here, which I haven't thought much of, because this just kind of goes without saying, here in Denmark, we don't use GMO. Not at all. That's politically decided. That's a no-go. We don't do gene-modified products. That's a complete no-go in Denmark. So we don't have GMO in Denmark, so don't need to worry about that. So for me, the choice is either organic or non-organic. And since we have a very high policy on keeping the pesticides as low as possible to protect our groundwater, which then actually turned out not to be enough, so now they're downsizing even further to the use of pesticides and different forms of poison so we can preserve our groundwater and not destroy our soil, and finding new ways to grow crops and all of these things that are on a political level are decided. How do we do that as a country compared to, because we're a little country, remember, compared to other places where it's up to the farmer, him or herself, how they want to produce their food. We don't have that in Denmark. Both farmers and whoever's here is always under some kind of legislation that they must adhere to, because this is Denmark. Everything is under legislation. So for people that are living other places where the personal freedom to do whatever they want to do can be a little bit challenging, coming to Denmark and living in Denmark and being on Danish law. But I grew up with it. So for me, it's completely, yes, all of these laws make sure that we're all playing nice, that we are all doing for the betterment of our country. And yes, of course, there are the rotten branches and things that are not being upheld and all of the things that there always is. But at least there is a will towards trying to regulate in a manner that will lead to more healthy environment lead to more healthy decisions and lead to a better health care and a better type of environment for the citizens of Denmark. That's the idea, whether or not it's upheld, whether or not it's success, and all of these kind of things. You can make the laws, but it's not the same as people will follow them, right? So just saying that's the culture of Denmark. I grew up with that. It's always been like that. So, although it has changed, just do the food pyramid as the recommendation of what to eat. Years ago, there was a lot of meat in it, animal products, but now they have downsized it. Most of it is plant-based. Most of it is what we call organic type of food sources. They recommend that you do organic, but of course they can't prove that organic is better than non-organic, right? Not yet, because then if they did so, well, then all of the ones that are producing non-organic, they will be out of business. So there are always these political decisions. Nothing is ever evergreen, so to speak. None is ever fully good, because we're dealing with humans, we're dealing with politics, we're dealing with financial systems, we're dealing with economy, we're doing with business, we're doing with trade, and all of these things where all the human interest must be taken into consideration when we do laws and when we do regulations, right? So nothing is ever as it should be or could be or were the best solution. It's always a kind of compromise anyways. So that's the political angle on it. Let's not make things more rosary or more perfect than they are. Knowing that this is reality, this is the world, this is the complexity of the world we're living in. We're living amongst humans with their own ideologies and ideas of what's right and wrong, about how they want to do things, their own psychodynamics, their own psychological structure, their comfort zone, what they feel is the right approach to how we should live. For some, it's about money, earning money. For others, it's about well-being. And these are the dichotomies. These are the challenges that we are working under when we do the food, health, and environment project. So it all comes down to our own personal standpoint, not expecting regulators, lawgivers, policymakers to fix it for us, not expecting farmers or the grand general population out there to change their ways. So we need to find the little producers, the little communities, the little segments where we can say at least we have the same value system. And that is typically when we talk organically made. And years ago, I decided to do organic, and I have thought that I bought organic completely except from a few items. And lo and behold, I begin to look at my products, and some of the ones that were organic years ago are no longer organic. And of course, I kind of know, oh yes, that's because we all gone plant-based, so they need to produce more now. So they can't do it within the few farmers that are producing organic. And the big food producers that are producing some of these things, as Nestle or some of the others, they want to do the vegan stuff because there's a market there. So they are doing vegan products and they are doing non-GMO. But at the same time, it's also this kind of, okay, but it's not organic because that's more expensive. So and I'm laughing a little bit here because that's kind of when I'm looking into the kind of, fuck, what happened? That's a kind of big surprise. So that's, I'm a little bit amused by it. At the same time, so I'm also a little bit, yeah, this just serves you right, Randi. You went into a rut, you went into an idea, you had that idea that was how it was, that was how it was going to be and remain and so forth. But no, circumstances change. So we need to be always mindful. And that's a good exercise for me to, yes, look at stuff. Don't just take for granted that what it was yesterday will be today, because you buy it once and then they change it overnight. They change what's in them, the products, what they are made of, and then they change it from organic into non-organic, but it's still vegan, right? But so that's hilarious, because where I grew up, when it was vegan, it was naturally also organic. So that's just in my face. Yeah, Randi, you got a little bit of comfort zone there you need to adjust to, and then get up to speed with that yes, there's a new market there. Just because it's vegan does not mean it's organic. So that's the new discernment level that I didn't have before, because as I said, where I grew up and when I grew up, if it were vegetarian or if it were recipes with vegetarian food or products that were under the label vegetarian, not that I am a vegetarian, but that was in the old days. We didn't have vegan back then. We do now. And then vegan, then of course it was organic. Clearly not. So, and in that process, I'm also beginning to ponder upon, okay, because things have just gone so quite crazy the last 5 years, especially the last 2 years. I've kind of gone a little bit lazy in producing my own food, as I said, out of necessity. And that means some of the vegan products that I bought have kind of been pre-produced. And I'm now saying, now's the time. I've done the course material. I've done all the stuff I needed to. And this is the project where I go in and say, okay, this is for the future. This is how can we adapt our food habits and not just buying all of these pre-produced plant-based vegan type of foods. Because clearly now the general market is taking that one over, and we know their value system is for profit. So that means that even though it's vegan, it's now infused with pro-profit kind of negative connotations to it, as in, yeah, we produce this, but we're still doing it within factories that also have non-organic material, that also has meat production, that has all of these. So this is where we really are observant of, okay, if we do products now, just because they're vegan does not mean that they are produced in an environment we actually want to be part of. This is where the energy expands. So this is again, and I saw that years ago, I saw that were some of the Danish brands that used to be what we call spiritually infused. They have now just become everyday brands. Like everything else, and they're being advertised and marketed and upgraded and operated, branded and operated as kind of everyday business. This is what happens. You have all the small ones with the right value system that has the right ideas, the right energy, that are doing it for the betterment of humanity, and they will be bought up because they can't resist this when these big businesses come in and say, oh yeah, I want to give you so and so many billions for your company, and then say, oh yeah, then I can do this and that, whatever, and they let go. And if they were to stay in the market, well, then they probably would face a huge competition. So in the end, they're being pushed out, and that's unfortunately a very common market dynamics. I remember when I studied business back in 2002 and 3 years ago, right? Then that was part of the theory, as in when we do the SWOT analysis, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats. That's part of the threats. Which market do we go into, and are there the big businesses there? Because if there is a big business in the niche or the market we want to be part of, well, then they will either try to push us out or they will take us over. So that's also an issue that we need to take into consideration when we talk about our own projects. But here we're talking about food. So we need to be observant of that our food, the ones that supplies it, might used to be the local farmer, but things happen, right? They have to pay their bills and rent and food on the table. So they might have sold out and now begun another project, or they grew tired and it was too much hard work and then they sold off. But the brand is still the same. The name is still the same, but that does not mean that the product is the same. So that's the first observation point I want to put in here, which, I think it's important that we always look into our products before we buy them. And I do online. I don't do groceries. I haven't been in a shop for 3 years actually, which suits me quite well because here a little bit personal. I've been a single mom, and I never had a car. I do have a driver's license, but I haven't driven a car for 20 years. So that would be hazardous, or dangerous. Another word, dangerous for me to go out on the road. Plus, I never know if a gray or something suddenly pops in, and if I'm out driving a car, not a good combination, right? So no bicycle. That's been my mean of transportation, or public transportation. So whenever before I moved here, before I stopped going to the grocery shop, I had to go down a very, very steep hill and up that steep hill with all my groceries on my bike, and I was buying for me and my offspring. And so that was a lot of groceries, right? And I just grew so tired of it, tired of being in the shop, tired of being with the other people. And as I grew more and more sensitive, it became difficult for me. And in 2016 and 17, it actually began being like, as I felt like I had OCD, as if I can't touch the groceries because then I get the imprint of other people, or I leave my imprint and then they can touch that, and then there's a field merging. So no, and the reason why that came was because of the interactive simulation program that began to break down, that had kept up that density level that actually ensured that we were not influencing each other unless there was a need for the parasites to jump or something else to happen. But as the old program broke down, and the sun began shifting out of its configuration and began becoming or shutting down all the shields and the fields, well, then that original holographic property and feature of interacting and imprinting holographically, energetically with the energy units, because they have a kind of code system to it. So of course it influences each other. So that was also why I just kind of said, yeah, no. At least I kind of know when I get it from the ones that are packing it, they're using gloves, and the one that are delivering it is using gloves. And no, it's not bacteria fright, and it's not due to the pandemic, and it's not due to OCD, and I don't want to touch anything. But I want to put in there, I have always had a little bit difficulty with people and their dirty hands, because personal hygiene is not for everyone. We know that. There's a lot of people that go to the loo and they don't wash their hands with soap afterwards. We know that. Right? Especially a huge bunch of males that just kind of, I barely touch my dick. Yeah. Right? You say, Randi, you are hysterical. Yes, I might be. But we are some that has this kind of personal hygiene, value it very high, and are a little bit, have a different approach to the physical organism than most of the clones and most of the people out there that's been in this organism for so long that they think that that's all there is. But those of us who comes from other realities where energies play a huge role and holographic features play a huge role and field interference plays a huge role, and getting into this very dense, low-level, engineered type of body with all of its bacteria and microbes and what have you, we kind of know, whenever you touch something, it's not just about you touching, so you leave behind a bunch of bacteria, you leave behind a bunch of microbes. And you can say people that suffer from OCD, they have that awareness, but it's just propelled out of balance, so it has become a disorder where they can't touch anything. And that has to do with other psychodynamics. It often has to do with early childhood trauma, unless, of course, it's neurological. That's also an issue. That could also be a kind of dysfunction in the neurology that makes the perception of reality become something dangerous. But mostly it is actually founded in trauma, which people that work deeply with it figure out what that is. Why they need that extreme cleanliness and that extreme purity, and what has that to do? Why do they feel dirty if they've been in contact with something other people have touched? And one thing could be abuse, sexual abuse. So anyway, so I'll just leave it there. So that's not the case. But there are different, when we talk about me, but there are different approaches to how we navigate around the purity rate. And there are different approaches to people. Some are all into fasting. I'm not, because my metabolism is simply too high for fasting. Plus, I can't see the purpose of it. It makes no sense to me. I know people say, I feel so pure and I don't need to do this and that and whatever. And I'm just kind of, I keep my purity rate up all the time with the food I eat. I clear my food. I do whatever I can. And not eating is not productive for me. Because if I'm not eating, well, then I can't use my high order capacity. My brain shuts down because my brain needs the glucoses from the food I eat. So I can't process the high order energies. If I fast, then I'll just become a lump of meat that, yes, I'm not eating. And yes, my body is creating ketosis. And yes, my body might feel, I'm so free from eating. I don't have to process that heavy food. And you might feel high and what have you. You might feel you clear out the molecular level. But the cost for me is, and all that time I wouldn't be in contact with the true levels that are actually clearing my energy system. That is the high order energies, where I work in self-healing, where I work with the high order energies, trying to integrate them. And by that, transform and transmute the lower types of energies, whereas fasting just brings you down to the physicality, and then it will only last for the week, and then you will have lost whatever was going on there. So for me, fasting is not an option and not something I recommend either, but I can't tell you not to, because people are different. Some feel that that's important to them. I'm just saying, whenever I talk to people that are doing fasting, for me, that's absolutely complete no-go, because that has no purpose in my vocabulary. It has no function whatsoever. So that kind of goes with that understanding. Plus, the fasting goes back to the Hindu, Brahminian chakra system ideologies, and I'm not into them either. So it goes into ideologies and belief systems I'm not supportive of. So thereby, fasting makes no sense to me. But I have days where I don't feel inclined to eat that much. I have days where I drink more water than others. I have days where I feel the need to clear out more, but actually I prefer clearing out in exercise. I prefer clearing out, using my body, make it burn off these energies, and then drink a lot of water. That's how I prefer clearing out my body. And I have an enormously high intake of fluids during the day, probably a great deal more than what most people drink during the day, because of the constant processes and the constant attachment or link up to the other dimensions that also demands a lot of fluids for my body to work and process these energies and clear them out. So my body works differently. So that's not the case here, but we're discussing how does Randi's body work compared to mine. But the point here is that this podcast, I want to address that there are individual needs that must be addressed. You need to figure out what are your individual needs when we talk about food. And there is this observance of that products are not just products, that they can change because reality changes and people changes and policy changes and all these kind of things, and chemtrails. There is the idea of organic food, which, aside from the chemtrailing and all of the pollution and all of the underworld forces and everything that's there that, of course, are influencing our food, even though it's grown organically, it still has a high degree of underworld energies. It still has chemtrail, nanobot pieces in it. It still has heavy metals in it from the soil. It still has old pesticides that were being used ages ago on the soil that is now being used for organic material. And it can be produced by people that are highly contaminated by demonic energies or underworld energies or different types of dark forces and what have you, that will influence what they touch and what they're working with. So just because it's organic does not mean it's better, but it means that at least it's built within a thought form and a belief system and a kind of ideology that goes with, let's try and preserve nature, although the ones that can, if we kind of have that weird construction that you actually have an organic farmer, but he's a dark one, a neo-Atlantean one, so whatever he touches, he turns into dark light food. So just because it's organic does not mean it's good. So we need to energetically look at what we're dealing with before we buy it. When you look at your groceries, whether you do it in the shop or you do it online, try and look into what's behind. Is it actually a faction that creates this? That's a complete no-go. For instance, bananas, I should not buy it, but my body needs it. So there I compromise. Unfortunately, you can try. I am not trying to be on the high horse and be completely rigid that everything has to be this or that, whatever, because that would take away some kind of food, things that I actually enjoy, such as coffee. So again, you say, then you can do the plant-based, coffee's plant-based, but a different type of coffee that is built upon, I can't remember what's called in English. There are different substitutes for coffee. And yes, I could do that. But I need the coffee sometimes to narrow down my neural network, because sometimes it spaces out and I drink coffee to narrow it down and I use the caffeine. You say, you could just do caffeine in tea. Yes, but it doesn't work the same way as coffee. And you say, that's just a bad excuse. It's because you're addicted to coffee. Okay, then I'm addicted to coffee. I like my coffee. We can always find all sorts of excuses, but sometimes when we talk about food, there's a reason why our body wants that food. So for me, it's kind of, yes, I could be rigidly in all of this. And you can say, why aren't you, Randi? And that's a good question, because I have been rigid about a lot of other stuff. But at the same time, I've also been doing that rigidness for periods of time. And in the end, it has just proven, because there are so many influencing factors in our reality, that in the beginning, I thought that by literally secluding a lot of stuff and not doing a lot of stuff, then everything would be good and fine. But it showed itself to be only working on certain levels, and then on other levels, it doesn't matter that much. As in, when you're working your way out of the base program, it's like being an alcoholic. You need to stop drinking alcohol in the period of time to completely forget and reconstruct your neural network, not to be craving it and feeling that's important to have a life. You need to do the psychological changes. You need to do the reconstruction of your personality matrix, your value system, what you think is important and not important. And in that process, sometimes it's good to completely abstinate from it, completely let it go and not doing it at all. For instance, if you ask me, would I go back and do sugar stuff, for instance? No, I cut that out of that is kind of processed sugar. I do plant-based sugar, and I do fructose, of course. That's part of my food. But I don't do cookies with added sugar. I don't do stuff that is added sweetener, because what's the point? It's already naturally in my fruit and the food I'm eating, so I'm getting it there. So that I will not go back to. But does that mean that if I go to some kind of birthday where there's a vegan cake or something, that I won't eat it? No, of course I will eat it. I'm there. They are offering me that vegan cake. It must be vegan, right? At least I put my foot down there. So with that kind of this is being a good guest. So there are circumstances where we are just not being rigidly, that has never been in the means of when we're out with base program humans and other humans, then we don't need to be that rigid, because that actually causes more distress and more distortion energies than just being a good guest that are grateful for whatever the hosts have come up with. And that's a good old ways in the tribal fourth cycle, including other stuff that we are dealing with. So it's not clear cut this or that. There must be this kind of discernment for every single thing that we're doing. So is it okay to do it now, or is it contradictory to what we want to achieve in our energy work? So that's also part of the food. Is this kind of a food that is good for us right now? Is it, or detrimental to the levels that we're working with? For instance, if you're working with underworld energies, it's not a good idea to do cacao. That's a complete no-go. So that's a no-go to chocolate and cacao and chili and all these kind of things that goes with the old fourth cycle shamanic races. So that goes into that understanding as well. So we need to know what are the energies of the food we eat, when it is conducive and when it's detrimental to what we want to achieve. And once we have achieved what we wanted to do and completed that timeline and shut it down and demolished that energy system, then we might be able to resume something we couldn't eat back then, but now we can eat it now if we still feel that it is, in terms of the 12 choices of life and non-exploitation, if it's still okay, right? So there are these concerns that must be done, all depending on the timelines we're on, what type of energies are we working with, what do we want to achieve with the food that we are intaking, not just because we want to, it needs to taste good and what have you. We need to feel in what are the nutrients we need right now in concordance with the energy work we're doing, in the architecture we're trying to build. Because food is energy as well as nutrients, as well as a solidified matter that our body can break down and get energy from. It's also energy. And even though we clear the energy, it still has the signature of what it is. And sometimes that is working well for certain levels of our energy system. So that's a whole new level of awareness when we put together the recipes of the week, where we find our recipes, who has made the recipes, what's the products that are used in this recipe. And eventually I will recommend, once you've done enough recipes from others, you create your own recipes, so that you have the products that are from farmers and producers that you kind of can say thumbs up to the degree that is possible. There will always be insectoids. There will always be some kind of avian. There will always be some kind of imprint of something, but at least it's not in the heavy end of negativity, right? And then transform that level of energy so you disconnect the food you have in your hand from where it comes from and make it part of your reality, your home, your environment that is your home, as we talked about in the advanced work with the rotundum and the advanced work with nutrition from the progression science course material. So we have that understand that once it get into our house, we adapt it to what? To our energy setting, especially when going to the fifth cycle. But there, your whole architecture will have that emission. So you will work with the food before you prepare it. You will have it in your hands and you will transform it into what you need it to be. And there discover, can I actually work with this? For instance, I always liked potatoes, but I'm getting more and more whenever I look at potatoes, I kind of feel like vomiting. So that kind of means my body's kind of saying, yeah, you don't want potatoes anymore. Potatoes is a no-go. And then I have to find substitutes for potatoes because that has been a huge part of my life. I grew up with potatoes. I love potatoes, but they are I don't find any brands that are really good anymore. They're weird and they're full of weird. No, potatoes are there that's just another example of things that are grown in the ground or in the soil. Not always a good thing to eat. All depending on where they come from, including carrots, which I used to love, but they are also, when I look at them, they kind of, it looks like weird stuff are coming out of them because they're grown in the soil. So that's also one of the things that I want to put into when I now put together new recipes and put together new types of cooking food and begin to work with food in a different way. When I do cook food, then it will take hours. It's not just about, take 5 minutes, then I got the food on the table, right? No, this is going to be a process. It's similar to with the exercise that is an energetic clearing process. Walking out in the woods is an energetic clearing process. Horizontal energy work is a clearing process. Vertical energy work is the mental clearing process. Working with food is now becoming an energy work transformational process. So now it's a whole project to cook a meal. But that's the whole process of creating the new pattern behind the food I'm eating. What type of food am I eating? How am I putting these different items together? What does it mean to create that type of food? What is the imprint I want to put into it? What is that I want to achieve with the food I'm making? And then you're kind of saying, well, wow, that's going to be too much for me whenever I cook my food. And I completely agree with you. And in the future, well, we would just get the pill, right? Because there our body has adjusted to density 1 and we technically don't need anything other than a little bit of supplement, which is not naturally occurring in the density 1 environment that our molecular structure in the future still needs. So that's all what these pills are for. But right now, we are in the transition period where we still need organic food. And I'm here saying organic because we do choose both the organic biomatter, but also as organic material grown under organic principles and non-GMO and all of these things that we can come up with, at least. So the philosophy behind is still in the vicinity of something we could say, yeah, we wish everybody would use the planetary resources in a manner that actually would lead to the highest good of the many, right? That would be nice. So that's the minimum requirement. But of course, there are certain things we can't get organic, and then we can either choose not to have them as part of our kitchen, or we can say, okay, I'll compromise on that one because there's a nutrient there I can't find anywhere else, such as there are this weird combination in bananas that my body needs. And I can't find it in any other things. I don't know exactly what it is. And if I'd studied a little bit more science about what foods are made of, and I actually have a book that explains that, then we are going down to the micronutrients. Something to do with that, something to do with what the banana does when it gets in contact with the microbial environment in my stomach that produces a specific type of branch of glucoses that my brain needs. And that's the information I'm getting. So I can't get that anywhere else. It's something to do with, if we look at what the bananas are made of, it's like they have these filaments. And some of the nutrients in the bananas, this is energetic speech. This is not science, but as I see it. Because I asked the question, what is it in the bananas that I need? And then the information is that in the bananas, there is this filament that kind of, it's a nutrient. It's a kind of, it's not a DNA strand, but it is a kind of phyto or plant DNA. So in that, once that one stretches out, it goes in and attached to a specific level of my RNA that unfolds specific and unlocks specific type of glucoses hexagonal structures in my mind. That's the neurons in my brain operate in a specific way when I eat bananas. So I need my 2 bananas a day, which is the amount that I need to take in, no more than these 2 bananas a day. Then I get it. And I'm not eating entirely 2 bananas because that's normally part of my smoothie that lasts for 2 days. So anyways, combined with the other types of fruit I use in my smoothie, that creates that environment that allows my brain or the neurons in my brain to process information in a specific way. So food is so much more than just food. And that's part of the new approach when we talk 5th cycle, where you begin to learn what type of food do you need to eat to make your biology work perfectly so it can link up to your type of higher order energy system. And everything you produce and everything you cook should be from that perspective. What are the sciences behind, as in here, actually, if you are interested in working with the nutrients, when you investigate, is that an item for me to eat? And then you should get the answer from within as a yes or a no. And then you will see why you should do it. And then you might forget it again. I might forget about the bananas again. But if I do ask a question later on when I look at it, if I shift timeline and my brain begins to work in a different way, then I might discover that bananas are no-go now, and now it's only mango and apples or something. So just to put it in context, just because it is that way now does not mean that it is that way forever. And that's the takeaway here. So food becomes a highly personalized and individualized intake that must be addressed from an energetic angle of what is giving you the best foundation to create that energetic architecture you need on the current timeline you are on now and on the current processes you are undergoing right now. How does your food and the project of working with your food to create the nutrients you need, that is also an exemplification of actually putting your energy system configuration into something you are working with on the outside of yourself, actually producing something, creating something, using your energy system in interaction with what you're working with, adapting it, transforming it, upgrading it to its highest potential so it can become the most optimal nutrient for your body that will then, in a feedback loop, amplify your architecture and your energy system, so that food is not just because it tastes good, but food is because it's an important piece of recreating that architecture you need to work with right now in that period of time that we're working with it. And then also understand that later on you might have to shift out of that food habit, and then what you thought was good for you might not be it on another timeline. There you will substitute with other types of foods. So that means buying food is not just about what you like and what you liked yesterday, but actually looking into energetically for the next week, being able to do a little bit of precognition, have a little bit of understanding of what are the energies of the week following the rotunda, what are the signature of what's going on right now, as in kind of, are we at the beginning of the month? Are we at the end of the month? And what's going on? Are we on the solar calendar, on the lunar calendar? What's going on in the sky? How's the sun operating for now? Is it shedding off a lot of CMEs? Does that influence the type of food that we can eat in the upcoming week? So we can balance that one out so we remain under the blue light sun technologies and take, not technologies, but energies. So we resume and remain as part of the 5th cycle on the timeline that we have chosen to be part of. So food then becomes enormously important because it's a huge part of our biology. So if we eat something that's not energetically in alignment with our higher order energy system, then we will create distortion. So that's a completely different approach to food. So that's what I want to put in here in the second podcast. And you know the number 2 is all about energy and energy currents. So that's where that one fit in, that making food now and engineering your own recipes and working with food is now becoming a project in itself that has its goal of transforming and as supporting the energies of your body so that will be in alignment with the energy architecture you're trying to build in your energy work, in your clearing work, in your meditation work, in your daily exercises, in your project work, and whatever you're trying to exemplify. Food then becomes a vital, important piece of that process of transforming energy and exemplifying who and what you are on all levels of what you are, including the food that you are creating, because it is a project. It is something you are creating using your energy to give that feedback loop of having the highest configuration, energetic configuration that are in connection to the fifth cycle energies, the blue light sun or the blue light star configuration, as well as the outer domain original configuration of our reality field. So that's the transformational work we need to do with food. Cooking is not just cooking. Now it has become a project of transforming energy for the highest good of you, for the highest good of the food, for the highest good of the many, for the highest good of the reality field. Whole different approach. Thank you.